Welcome back to the Owner Seat podcast. I'm going to jump right in. Most people buy a business and accidentally buy themselves a job. They sign the papers, and a year later, the thing only works when they're standing in the room. My guest today spent over 20 years figuring out why that happens and how to build the opposite. Scott Capelin is the founder and CEO of InLife Wellness, where he helps everyday people open and run profitable Pilates-inspired studios. Oh man, Pilates is hot, with full support from day one. But Scott didn't start there. He spent over a decade as a multi-unit franchise owner, running 5 Vision personal training locations across Australia and New Zealand before he sold every one of them in 2011. He logged more than 30 hours training clients face-to-face. He built Tribe Social Fitness, studying the best fitness models in the world, created pre-choreographed group programs so instructors could actually connect with members, and learn brand building from Ann McKevitt. You know the name. He became an international #1 best-selling author, and he's written 2 books, Fit to Flourish and In Shape, In Love, Inspired. Love that title. Then came the turn. Scott found Pilates, watched low-impact movement rebuild his own body, and that became the seed of the InLife Wellness model you see today. A studio that's cost-effective to open, simple to operate, and built on systems that remove the guesswork. He runs the InLife Wellness School of Pilates and group exercise certification, and he was recently named one of Entrepreneur Mirror's top 10 visionary leaders driving global change. Scott, welcome to the Owner Seat podcast, sir.
Thanks very much, Albert. Good to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been following you for quite some time, and you're obviously positioned to continue to do great work. I mean, I'm loving Pilates. I know it's big out in Sydney and New Zealand, the States. It's booming. So I can't wait to chat with you. And I know a lot of the franchisees that are listening to this are going to have a lot of fun. So I want to jump right in. You owned, as I mentioned, 5 Vision personal training franchises across Australia and New Zealand. And then you ended up selling them back in 2011. So looking back, what did running all 5 units at once teach you about unit economics? We speak a lot about that on the show, as well as the P&L. What were some of the big lessons?
Well, I'm really big on financial literacy. I spend a lot of time now with studio owners. It sort of never ceases to amaze me that people can work pretty hard and be very passionate about business and not look at their P&Ls for 15 months. I guess to answer your question, some of the main metrics that I learned were payroll percentage, what percentage of your total revenue is going straight back out in labor costs, rent percentage, what percentage should your rent be of total revenue? And of course, then there's profit margin. So, if you look at your total revenue like a pie, we like to keep payroll percentage under 35, keep rent under 15%. All other expenses under 20%, so leaving a 30 to 35% profit margin.
Excellent.
I think a lot of people get it wrong with the wages and the rent, 2 biggest expenses in most studios.
Right. No, that's so spot on. We chat a lot about that on this show around unit economics, and that's actually great benchmarks. I would say really strong benchmarks. And if you can do that and you get 35 cents on the dollar in your profit margin, you're doing it right. But you have to look at what your occupancy costs look like, what your payroll fully baked in with TMB look like. So you're spot on. After Vision, you actually built Tribe Social Fitness. And, I was looking at a lot of your posts, and as I did my research, I noticed that you had researched the top fitness models in the world first. What did you find as you were doing that? What separated the models that held their margins, as you just explained, from the one that maybe they're just great marketers? They just look good on paper, but that they were bleeding cash.
Well, I mean, probably 5 or 6 good points in that statement you just made there. I mean, gosh, I'd spent a decade or so in personal training, and, the great things about personal training are the focus on results. There's accountability for the client, education, and in these personal training studio environments, a client would walk in and we'd all use their name and everyone would know each other. There was a lot of banter. The problem was that, maybe 5% of the population could afford the service. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you got these big gyms where, they're great with their marketing, not so good at their retention. It's affordable, amazing facility, all the weights and cardio you could want, car parking, front desk, child minding, change rooms, but, not a real focus on service. So Tribe Social Fitness was designed to sit somewhere in the middle, all the benefits of personal training, community. Community is not just, warm and fuzzy and feel good. The community equals member retention, which our line of work is all about. It's more about retention than sales. But, as an Australian, we're always looking at the US as maybe being ahead of us and going to all the conferences and conventions around the world. Everybody wishes they had a crystal ball. What's next in fitness? But the beautiful thing about Tribe was, it was a medium-sized gym. And just to keep the numbers pretty simple, you got 1,000 members paying $50 a week for gym membership. So, that's 50 grand. Of those 1,000 members, we got 300 of those doing one-on-one personal training, spending another $100 a week each. So that's another 30 grand. Then you got another 300 members of those 1,000 doing small group 4-on-1 PT, spending a further $50. So, before you know it, you've got this, 8,000 square foot facility that's generating 85, 90 grand a week in revenue. And that was
Amazing.
probably a part of the model. The downside was it's not real scalable because there was a lot of moving parts. You got 3 group
Mm.
exercise rooms, a gym floor, front desk, 20 personal trainers. And, but, gosh, at that point, you probably only need 1 or 2 of those and you're doing quite well. So,
Yeah.
multiple revenue streams, tiered memberships were the positive. The downside was the complexity in the staffing model. I always say, you're trying to get, 15, 22-year-old personal trainers to wake up at 4:30 every day. It often doesn't last so long.
It's tough, but one thing that I love about you and you're so relatable. For those that don't follow you on LinkedIn, highly recommend it. But you've been in the trenches, right? And no disrespect when I say this, but there's the ivory tower kind of influencer speakers. And then there's someone like you who's been in it. I mean, logging over 30,000 hours training clients face to face. So you get it. You get the customer,
Mhm.
you get the member. How did that floor experience change the way you set your pricing and utilization targets compared to that owner who's just in the spreadsheets, right? Building a financial model, a pro forma,
Mhm.
but they don't necessarily understand I call it the MPOV, the member point of view.
Yep. Yeah. Great question. I guess when I was with Virgin Personal Training, there was basically a KPI as a trainer to do 40 hours of face-to-face personal training per week. So now that's 2,000 hours a year. I did that for 10 years. And then after that, I kind of backed off for the next 5 or 10 years and did more like 20 hours a week of personal training. And through those experiences, you really get to understand the motivation of a member or a client, what they want in a workout and what they want in a fitness experience, what drives member engagement and ultimately member retention. So how does that tie into the unit economics? Well, it's funny, the brand I'm with now, I've been in fitness for I think 27 years and just coincidentally, I've owned 27 studios, and this is the first brand I've had, my current brand, which is InLife Wellness, where
Yeah.
we haven't had contracts. And funnily enough, our member retention is about 250% on anything I've ever experienced before. Industry average for member retention is 6 months. We sit about 15 months per member. That means
Excellent.
that some members do stay for 4 months and others stay for 4 years. I guess unit economics is interesting. Like the more engaged a member is, the more they feel part of a community, the more they would be happy to pay, if that makes sense. But it's not as easy as it sounds to,
Right.
well, on one hand, it is realistic to have a studio and know 200 names. On the other hand, when you try and scale that, all of a sudden it gets a bit more challenging. But yeah, I do think I have the runs on the board. I've always been a slow learner, but I get there in the end and I've always been quite persistent. So yeah, funnily enough, I just turned 50 years old. I've been doing
All
okay last couple,
right.
taken 30 years to become an overnight success.
Oh, you're crushing it. Well, let's talk about in life wellness, right? So it's built on low impact movement. If I got that correct, right? A studio that's cost effective to open, the systems that remove the guesswork is what you put out there. So when
Mm.
someone is thinking about, prospective owner of some sort asks, like, what does it actually cost to open? How long until they are cash flow positive and start to see that payback? What's the odds? And for what you can share, how would you answer that?
Yeah, well, I mean, to dig straight into those numbers that you asked, I mean, the opening investment sits around $220,000, which is, probably half of any competitor we have in the
Yeah.
franchise landscape. So really proud of that. And I'm very passionate about return on investment. So it's funny how the $200,000 opening cost came about. I mean, I've opened up studios and gyms before in the past for 300 grand, 500 grand, 1 million, 2 million, 4 million. I can tell you, you don't have to do it. Ultimately, we all get the same amount of members, all paying about the same amount of money. So why not try bring our opening costs down as low as possible? Our studios are still gorgeous. We're just very strict on our location criteria. Finding a studio space that requires very minimal build out. We don't have front desk. But look, the studios do cost about 200 grand to open, and the aim is to be cash flow positive on day one. Now, the way we do that is we really nailed this 16-week pre-opening marketing and sales campaign. The aim in the 16 weeks prior to opening is to open with 200 members or more. 200 members, paying 150 a month. That's on a founding member special. That's 30 grand, and that's beyond break even for us. Our model overall is built on 40 grand a month revenue, maybe 50 grand, expenses 25 to 30. So if you can profit that 15 to 20 grand a month, we're doing pretty well. That's with 8 to 12 instructors who are basically contractors. We like to keep our total annual rent under 90 grand, including triple net. But, like I say, if a studio has 40 classes a week, instructor gets $50 a class, it's 2 grand a week in wages. We're looking at $1,500 a week in rent. So if we can get that, wages 8 to 10 grand a month, rent 6-7 grand a month, like I say, revenue 40 grand a month. All the other expenses are quite minor, incidental. In Pilates, we go through a lot of antibacterial wipes. You've got your internet, electricity, even insurance is only about $4,000 a year. So pretty tight model. I know there's another large Pilates brand that has average revenue per studio, 75 grand a year. They've got average expenses of 65 grand per month, I should say, not per year. So it still amuses me when people talk in revenue. I think we should all be talking in profit.
Oh, I love it. And cash flow. So
Cash flow.
yeah, so
Cash flow.
low startup costs, right? And even the working capital. I love how specific you got. Thank you for sharing that. And I think they're great benchmarks for those listening. I work with a couple of Pilates brands that the one you're mentioning or referencing here that probably has been on the show. For those that are looking back at the shows, they're probably in there. But I love what you're talking about, how specific you're getting and sharing where the margin truly lives in this. What do you think it is, right? I mean, you speak very specific to the unit economics and margins. Why do you think most owners, most franchisees miss that mark? They get really excited about opening up, studio or, wellness clinic, and they soon realize that financial literacy is so important, right? Operating the P&L, but not just revenue. How much cash are you generating, right? How much EBITDA are you generating? What are your thoughts on that? What have you found is just the missing link?
I think when I meet a lot of people wanting to open a Pilates studio, in my case, a franchise, one of the first things I ask is, are you going to be owner operator, owner manager, or owner investor? What's your role going to be in the business? A lot of people it can be a passion play. You would not believe how many studios I've helped people open, and through the process of due diligence, they've never once asked, how much money can I make? The thing is, InLife Wellness, as we're approaching 80 studios in Australia, USA, and New Zealand, 95% of those studios are owned by either our instructors or our members. So it's really organic growth built from within. I feel like I got to be the guy that talks about the money. As a matter of fact, we just opened up a studio in a town called Melissa in the north of Dallas.
Yeah.
It set a world record in cost per lead. And just as far as I'm aware, it set a world record in members signed up before opening. It's opened up with 900 members. Now, I said to the owner, I'm so pleased that you're doing well financially, revenue, 125 grand a month, 60% profit margin. And she said to me, I just want to help women in the community. So I felt like a bad guy for talking about money, but I feel like somebody has to really take the investment of a franchisee very seriously. But look, back to your question, what's one thing people might miss or underestimate? If I have permission to look at somebody's profit and loss statement, the first thing I'll do is check labor costs. Some people have labor, 44 to 52% of total revenue. They're not even aware of it. They've tried to be nice and give instructors a few pay rises. They might have more classes on the schedule than required. They might have a manager getting paid more than is necessary. We're not trying to, we pay people very fairly, probably 20% over industry average. I'm talking about the instructors. But, and the other thing too, you've got your contractors, you may have a manager on a salary. All that has to count towards the payroll percentage. The thing is with a franchise system, we alleviate these errors because we don't let people make those mistakes. We won't let somebody sign on to a commercial studio space if the rent doesn't meet our criteria. I spoke to another franchise founder and I said, what's your rent model? And he said, a lot of our studios find it hard to be profitable when the rent gets over 200 grand a year. And I thought 200 grand, like every month the rent's kicking in at $18,000. That really hurts. You want your rent to be 6 or 7 grand, and these opportunities are out there. Funny thing is, We do really well in the probably the less sexy markets, you know. Some of the
Right.
hardest studios I've ever operated are in the glamour suburbs, but I just think people have really got to know their numbers. Funny thing is, fitness people are really good at the fitness piece. They're, they're not so good at the business piece.
I'm telling you, that's how Stratego came about. You're so spot on, and we're here to support, right? And I wanted to switch gears because you made me think about something around the experience and differentiating, right? So, by the way, love Melissa. I think I did not know that you all were in Dallas. I used to live in Allen, Texas. I'm now down here in Houston.
Yeah,
There's a great area too that's blowing up. Is it
yeah,
Salinas, right? Right
yeah.
up there,
Solana
and
studio opens in
yeah,
July.
we
Yeah,
gotta get you. Oh, it's awesome. I love it that you all are
yeah,
up
yeah,
there. It's amazing. It's booming.
yeah, yeah.
So
We're gonna.
I think go ahead.
Sorry, no, we should have 20 studios in Dallas just about by the end of the year.
Well, come on down to Houston. We love us some Pilates as well. And one of the things that I'm seeing in the space nationwide, really globally, is obviously Pilates is really hot, and I do think it's going to come down to how do you differentiate the experience, right? Classic. I think that's going to come down to our instructors. And what I love about what you do is you actually have an in-life wellness school of Pilates and group exercise certification. Can you walk us through that? Because I
Yeah.
think I'm seeing a lot of brands. I won't name them. Some of them are large. Some of them are these large franchisors that we see that are racing through this certification process. And I think it's going to be a big mistake. What I love
Mhm.
about what you do is you're very thorough. Clearly, for those that are tuning in right now, you can hear it. And I'd imagine it's the same with this certification process.
Mhm.
Can you walk us through what that looks like for the in life wellness instructors?
Yep, sure. Again, so many points to touch on there. I mean, certification is largely unregulated, you know, pros
Right.
and cons. I mean, it's accessible, but like you say, people are jumping on the bandwagon. The thing is, the quality of our instructors is the number one reflection on the brand. So it has to be on point. 95% of instructors at InLife Wellness Studios, they started as InLife Wellness Studio members. So internally, we advertise our certification program. You know, inevitably with any business or brand, you get people that fall in love with it. And the beautiful thing about the instructors being contractors is they can instruct 2 classes a week. They can instruct 6 classes a week. You know, instructors work across various multiple in-life wellness studios. So most of our instructors are in-life exclusive, which we love. I mean, I started the certification program to ensure that all of our franchises had enough instructors. Like any business, I think your team is your greatest asset. You need the right people and enough of them, you know. So we also do take on or recruit instructors who are already qualified and experienced. We just put them through our induction program. But as it turns out, from a business model franchise perspective, it was about 5 or 6 years ago, my accountant said, what a great pathway, member to instructor to
Mm,
manager to owner to multiple unit owner. And at the
right.
time, I said, that's not really the plan. And that's how it's turned out. If you look at our studios, over 90% of them are owned by people who started as instructors or members. And it's a really cool pathway. Our instructor certification program starts with culture, values, and standards before we even talk about anything to do with Pilates or exercise or anatomy. So, you know, the old saying, hire on character and train the skill. So, yeah, we're really
So
passionate
good.
about that. So, yeah, there really is that pathway. You know, it is a service for people that is delivered by people. So, you know, you're trying to systemize and put a framework around basically personalities and human nature. There needs to be a little bit of flexibility within that framework. Unlike some other brands, we don't pre choreograph the Pilates classes for our instructors. We teach our instructors to be really great instructors. The certification program is extremely comprehensive. It includes mentoring, group work, online work, you know, shadowing, observing, you know, practicing. There's so many elements to it. I won't go into too much depth, but you know, our instructor retention is really good. And if you're trying to build a community in a Pilates studio, you've got to retain your instructors. The
Yeah.
instructors stay for a long time. They get to know the members' names. The members know the instructors' names. But I always think the holy grail of member retention is when the members know each other's names.
So let me throw a wrench in that. And you've actually posted a little bit about this as you discuss strong franchise models. So I'm a big believer in the team member experience being strong and taking care of your instructors and having the best performers. However, there is the caveat. We saw this at Soul Cycle and some others, right? I've actually had a couple people on the show to discuss this where sometimes if you put too much emphasis on the performer and the instructor and you build a community where the member is only loyal to the performer, to the instructor, not the brand, there's a big risk there. So from a numbers standpoint, how do you build a studio so that that one instructor, right? We all know them. They're solid. I like
Yeah.
to say they're the performers, the divas, right? Sometimes, right? I think for those that understand, you know what I'm talking about there. That one instructor walking out of the door and taking, half your members with them. How do you protect against that?
That's a good question. I mean, I did what did I do? I participated in a case study last year and it analyzed 5 businesses. They basically called SoulCycle a talent management agency. There was a lot of, I mean, I've done SoulCycle classes before. They're amazing. I'm blown away by this person on the bike that feels like a life coach. I'm
Right.
in the back row shooting a tear out there. But look, when I owned the personal training studios, this is what happened. I call a personal training studio, it's kind of like a hair salon. Imagine you have 12 hairdressers, each hairdresser's
Right.
got 60 clients. If a hairdresser leaves, the clients go with them. Same happened in
Yeah.
personal training. The thing is, a Pilates studio member is exposed to basically 10 or 12 instructors, and we don't let any one instructor have too much of a dominant presence on the schedule. So
Mm,
the members are never really going to get attached to one person too much. I always say the members don't mind who instructs the class, but of course the members have their favorites. I just find that in this line of work, for some reason, it's a bit like a yoga. Like instructors don't leave your studio and open up another studio half a mile down the road. It just doesn't really happen very often. So I guess the members are exposed to a team. They don't
mm,
necessarily, just get one instructor that they get really attached to. Through member engagement events, like every month or every quarter, we'll be doing something. We could do a breath work workshop, a Valentine's Day class, a Christmas party. When members come to these things, I always say they're not going anywhere for a while. So I guess that's just how we do it. We just spread the workload out. Average member does 3.5 classes per week. They're probably going to be exposed to 2 or 3 different instructors in that time.
that's a
On
great
top of that,
strategy.
like I said, we just hire the right people. I was at a conference last week in New Jersey. The guy said he has a no jerk policy when he hires people, and we've got the same. Probably the only instructors I've ever had to, let go or ask them not to return over the last 5 or 10 years. They've been the technically most perfect, most experienced instructors. They just didn't have the care factor.
Right.
Um, we look at performance and we look at values. It's like a quadrant. We need high performance, high values. This is Simon Sinek stuff. It's not me stuff. I sometimes think of, you remember that movie, Rudy? We all like a
Oh,
Rudy.
yeah. I love that movie.
Yeah.
If you
But
haven't watched it, people go watch it. It's a great one.
Rudy.
Vince
Anyway,
Vaughn's like debut. If people don't know that he's in it. That's awesome. So switching gears, right? We're on the owner seat. Let's talk about owners. Right? You watched owners, and you posted about this recently where you mentioned you watched 2 owners run the exact same franchise, same system, same pricing, and they landed in completely different financial places, right? And you said the difference is in many ways is the owner. And one of the habits was looking at the numbers every week, right? We go back to the financial literacy. What would be your recommendation to the owners listening this today? How do they set themselves up for success while not being, we'll get to this here in a sec, the bottleneck?
so we're talking about magic metrics or main KPIs, numbers to be looking for.
Yeah.
The only time I've ever gone off track in the last sort of 20 years is when I delegate the finances or the numbers. Then you start to get a bit lost with it all. But, I call a business like, there's a saying that a business is like a baby in nappies, but the problem is it never actually grows up and walks on its own. I prefer to use the analogy of like a garden. With a
Mm,
garden, if you tend to it for 5 minutes a day, you'll keep it under control. If you neglect it for 2 or 3 weeks, it's probably going to grow some weeds. I mean, there's these main metrics like total member numbers, churn rate, basically cancellation or attrition rate. We're keeping that under 5% per month. So if my studio has 200 members, I'm trying to keep cancellations under 10 a month. And of course, I'm trying to sign up more than 10 people a month. Most studios have an intro offer. Ours is a 1-week trial for $29. The trial is low cost, high value, no obligation. Beyond the trial, members are ultimately joining a membership that has no contract. So why wouldn't they join up if they have a good trial experience? The trial needs 4 touch points. All these things need to be monitored. Taking a step back from that, how many leads are you getting daily, weekly, monthly? How many of those leads are converting into an intro offer? And how many of those intro offers are converting into a membership? Our focus is more on conversion rather than lead volume.
mm,
And when I say that, with our 1-week trial, every member that does a 1 week trial starts with a one-on-one introductory session with one of our instructors, which is great because it lets the member enter the class confidently. It really helps the rest of our team because if you ever taught a Pilates class and inevitably the new person comes 1 minute before the class and they don't know where to put their phone, wallet, keys, and then we
That'd be
give them
me.
some Pilates grip socks, that'd be huge. But look, one of my favorite sayings is that the things that are easy to do are also easy not to do. If you're sitting
Mm,
there, I'm pretty religious with my profit and loss statements. With my bookkeeper, I'm always saying, have you reconciled all the transactions? It's the second of the next month. I want to be analyzing the previous month. We've got a figure called booked utilization. It basically refers to what percentage of the schedule is full. Imagine there's 50 classes per week and there's 12 spots in a class. That means we've got 600 class spots per week. We want to keep our booked utilization. We want to fill over 80% of those class spots. If it's under 80%, I've got too many classes. I'm wasting money on instructor payments.
yeah.
If the
Yeah.
if it's too full, then the wait lists are too long. Members get upset, and then potential new clients don't even do a 1 week trial because they look at the schedule and it's all full. But we want. There's a thing called the business chassis. How many leads do I get? Can I increase my conversion? What's the average spend per head? And then in our line of work, it ties into member retention. Studios
I
are about retention.
love
They are
I
not about
love how
sales.
granular I love how granular you get. I mean, those are excellent measurables, and I hope people can rewind this and turn back and write those down, or if you're transcribing it or whatever, make sure
Mm,
that you have those in there. You're looking at them daily. So
yep.
good. I mean, you've been studying this for some time, right? I mentioned it at the top. Number one best-selling author, right? You have two books out there. You've studied brand building with Ann McKevitt, huge name out there with you, and you understand the demand. And as you add, I'm curious what your thoughts here are because I'm a big lover of your brand and life wellness. As you start to add more franchise partners, franchisees, how are you going to grow the brand and the unit count and still, and my questions around scaling, how do you protect that margin? How do you protect the experience? Sometimes I see franchise systems, they start to see the growing pains. They become so large, it's the scale aspect, the economies of scale aren't there,
Mhm.
and then the experience starts to change up a bit as you go state by state. How do you plan to protect that?
Yeah, it's a really good question and something I'm super conscious of. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 70 studio locations, and I mean, ultimately, that's just been in about 4.5 years. Sometimes to me it feels slow, and other times it
Mhm.
feels fast. But it's been extremely manageable, mainly because a lot of the growth has come from within. So what's challenging is I don't really like this terminology, but selling a franchise to somebody who's never stepped foot inside one
Mhm.
or, never been to one or possibly never heard of InLife Wellness. That's tough. I'm open to investors purchasing studios, but I want them to do it for the right reasons. Sometimes if the very first question is like, how much does it cost to open and how much money will they make? That's a fair question, but it's kind of not the right first question. It's like going on a date saying, how much money do you make? And, 70 studios, organic growth. I've just entered a phase of franchise marketing for the first time, and I'm expecting to go to 100 or 200 locations. That's the challenge for me. The induction process has to be super strong. The franchisee qualification process through the sales
Okay.
process. It's funny, somebody wants to open a studio and, we have these initial meetings. It feels like a job interview or again, like a first date. But if it's a job interview, I'm never sure who's interviewing who. But ultimately, I guess we're both getting a feel for each other. But, I'm very passionate and also fascinated with culture, whether it be a sporting team, look at the Cowboys, like those guys can all play. Like, why haven't they done anything for 30 years? I'm passionate about whether it's culture in business or sport. Most people have been part of a toxic work environment. Most people have been part of a great work environment. What are the commonalities? Even your question earlier, two locations, same brand, same systems, one performing, one not. What's the difference? It's
Mm.
leadership and culture.
Yeah.
So, and I'm very honest with these initial conversations. Like, I'm pretty happy to tell somebody that I don't think this is for them. Funnily enough, it usually makes them want it more.
Yeah.
But so far, so so far it's
True.
been good on good people, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Only 6% of franchise brands get past 100 units. So,
Mhm.
I'd like to be one of those, and I'd like to do it the right way. I'm pretty happy with incremental growth. Sometimes you feel like, oh, gosh, Pilates, the time is now. But, Pilates has been around for 110 years. It's probably not going anywhere.
Yeah, and that's a smart approach, right? The disciplined conservative route, which is interesting. I have a couple questions about that, but let me first ask you around capital. So you mentioned 220 on the build out and all of that. What are some of the recommendations or even creative ways for, not everyone has, 220 that they inherited or, they were able to save up. Sometimes you have to go the debt financing route. What are some of the creative ways or what are some of the most classic ways you found that, those that want to be a franchisee and get locked in with InLife? What are ways that you found or have been successful, maybe with the bank or something
Yeah,
else?
it's a good question. I mean, honestly, like I said, probably 3 times, yeah, we've got 70 locations. I can probably count on one hand the amount of people that have had to obtain finance because of the low opening cost.
Mm,
The other thing too that I do in select situations, if basically I like the person and trust them, of that 200 grand opening cost, $70,000 is the reformer Pilates machines. Rather than the franchisee purchasing them up front, I can buy them and they can just pay them off over 2 years.
Love that.
No interest. Now, I mean, what's in it for me? Well, basically getting another studio open. That's what's in it for me.
Sure.
The the payment plan is obviously outlined in the franchise agreement, and but obviously, if someone misses a payment, which has never happened, I'm not going to come and take the machines off them because they're going to need
Mm,
them to keep
sure.
producing revenue. So then they don't need 200; they need 130. And then again, we want to keep our build out, under 60 grand. There's initial franchise fee, 40 grand. But otherwise, SBA loans are a popular, bit of a laborious process, but they're pretty cool. I mean, honestly, there's not a loan facility like that in Australia, so it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's it. I mean, I don't really encourage people to get into too much debt and open a studio. I've seen it before. Just means you open with much greater break even point.
Sure. Yeah. You have the debt servicing line now. I love that. Well, I have a final question for you. I'm really curious on your thoughts here because I'm seeing a lot of private equity and family office in the fitness, wellness, and longevity space. And we're seeing it in Pilates. I find it really interesting actually to see one of the big brands out there, right, doing really well and really carrying the weight with one of these public entities that just came out with their revenue amounts of interesting, right? Pilates is clearly thriving across the board. And I think there's a lot of brands that will be rolled up. You've exited before, and so you understand that process of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and selling. For those brands out there, multi-unit, maybe not even a franchisor, but just independently owned multi-unit brands, what would you recommend knowing this is the window to kind of get your house in order so that when there's that due diligence, as you've probably experienced during that exit point, that they're ready to go and they get the most bang for their buck? What are your recommendations to that?
A brand looking to scale and exit or be rolled
Correct.
up.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure I understand the question properly, but the first thing that I think is business systems. A business must be able to operate without the owner.
Mm,
Systems are so important for consistency, for leverage and scalability. The business must be able to operate without the owner. Depending on the size of the company you're talking about, you know, some people want a franchise, and what are the criteria for that? Well, 3 is a bit of a magic number. 3 locations, maybe
mhm.
in 3 different markets. Are they all performing? Ideally 5, and then you want social proof. And then earlier you mentioned, my brand strategist, Anne McKevitt. She says, 18 months of PR can double the value of a brand, regardless of unit economics. So sometimes it's about social proof or the
Right.
perception of success. But you know, yeah, I'm really, like I say, really passionate about the numbers speaking for themselves. And when you sell a franchise or sell anything, it's you've got to sell it in good conscience. It's got to be a good opportunity for the
Mhm.
purchaser, a good opportunity for the seller. And these people, they're savvy, they're smart, they're not silly. You can't trick them. So all you got to do is have a rock solid business model and hope they see the value in it.
So spot on. Well, I really appreciate your time, sir. This is such an amazing conversation, and I'm hoping those tuning in, it changes and enhances the way they think about what they're building. And for those that want to learn more about you, Scott, and in life wellness, where's the best place to reach out to you, connect with you, and learn more?
InLifeWellness.com. That's one. Find me on LinkedIn, Scott Capelin, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just Google it. It'll get to me somehow.
I love it. Well, yeah, I'm a big follower of LinkedIn. You're very active on there. And for those of you that are listening for the first time, if you're a fitness, wellness, or longevity operator, franchisor, or franchisee, you heard a lot about the numbers today. And if you're looking for that CFO level clarity, financial modeling, capital raise prep, private equity readiness and unit economics, connect with me as well on LinkedIn or at Stratego. This has been another episode of the Owner Seat Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Albert Ramos. And again, if this is your first time, every episode, all our new episodes drop every Monday and Friday at 8 a.m. Central. Scott, thank you so much for your time. This was amazing. And congratulations. I can't wait. We need more in Houston. I'm waiting
Okay.
for you.
My pleasure, Albert. Hope I added some value. See you, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.